Hello, welcome to the Tompkins County Democratic Committee Candidate Forum for the first and second legislative districts in Tompkins County. We have the pleasure to have Nicole Fave and Travis Brooks from the first legislative district who are running for that seat, and Veronica and Leslie Schill from the second legislative district. The other person you see on the screen is my companion in this undertaking, Peter Rothbard, who is going to be our official timer. And I want to thank Ted Crane, who's our technical support, making this all happen on Zoom in our Zoom room with the candidates and on YouTube live streaming, which is where you all get to watch it. Let me remind you that you can share it with your friends if you're not watching it live now, or I should say, if you are watching it live now, you can remind your friends that they can watch it anytime. And I think we're going to be having this forum and the other two forums. We had one for the candidates in legislative districts 8 and 13 on the 10th. And we had a forum for the city council candidates in Ward 1 and Ward 5 on June 7th. And we're going to be available on channel 13 of the public access television. So there'll be a lot of opportunities to watch these forums, and the whole purpose of them is just to help the voters get to know the candidates in their districts better. It's hard for the candidates to get out and knock on every door, even now that things are coming back to a more normal state of affairs. And so this is a good way for people to get to the voters to get to know the candidates and see them, in action, thinking about the issues and discussing them with one another. So we appreciate that you're here, and we appreciate the candidates' participation. So with that, let's start with the candidates are going to have 3 minutes each for their opening statements. And I'll just go around the screen the way that folks appear to me on the screen. So let's start with Travis Brooks.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for putting this together so we could get out and talk to the constituents. My name is Travis Brooks. I've been in the Ithaca community for 30 years. I've been working at the Greater Ithaca Activity Center for the last 22 years, almost 23 years. A lot of my work has been advocating for folks that find themselves without a voice in this community, standing up for those who have had a tough time, creating programs and creating opportunities for people to better their outcomes, experience success. And over the last, I would say the last 12 years, I've been doing more of this on a bigger level throughout the entire Ithaca community. And I found that, that there's a place in this community to bring people together, to find common threads amongst each other, and really hone in on that. And just create opportunities for the entire community, to uplift the whole community. And that's what my work has been about. I understand that we have differences, we have different backgrounds. I understand the isms, I understand the structural issues. But there really is a place for us in this community to come together, to really look at each other in a different way, and find opportunities to build, find opportunities to move forward in a way that leaves no one out, that takes care of everybody's needs, and that the most marginalized folks really can succeed in this community. I think that as a legislature, there's an opportunity, it's like a preacher, to use your bully pulpit to bring people together and use that leadership to look at issues. So whether it's daycare, housing, and bring experts together and find solutions that make sense for everybody in this county, to find solutions that are doable, that are workable. I think so often we get away from that, and we focus on us. And as a legislature, we have our own opinions, we have an agenda, but those agendas are supposed to represent the people in this community. And so if we're not out talking to the people, if we're not out connecting to the people with the people, then we're not actually representing the people. And so that's been a goal for me this whole time, is to meet people, talk to people, hear what people need and hear what they want, and represent them. So that's why I'm running. That's why I'm here. And thank you for being with us this evening.
Nicole.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole Fave. I am excited to be here. I want to thank the Tompkins County Democratic Committee for hosting this event and everyone that is tuning in at home. I've been a member of the Ithaca community for the past 18 years. I have been a college student as well as a parent in this community. I'm the mother of 3 beautiful children, an activist, a community organizer, a loving friend, a good neighbor, and empath. My life's work has always been connected to social justice and racial justice. My life's work has always been connecting with people and listening to their stories, their experiences, their narratives, and advocating for the needs of the have-nots, shining light on injustices and demanding more for the people and for my people. I've served the community in different capacities over the years. I've served on the Ithaca City Police Review Board to bring a different voice and perspective and life experience to the governing body. I've sat on the United Way grant review team, reading grant applications from our local not-for-profit organizations, doing amazing equity work to provide relief to vulnerable communities within the county. I've served as an elected official for the past 5 years as a member of the Board of Education for the Ithaca City School District, fighting to close the education gap and for all of our babies to receive an equitable, inspiring, and educational experience. I'm also a co-founding member of Black Lives Matter Ithaca. I've committed my life to being a public servant because I strongly believe in being part of the change that I want to see in the world and specifically in the community, the place where my children call home. I want my children's home to be a safe place where they feel safe to grow, to make mistakes, and to thrive. I'm running for the county legislature because I'm a leader, a trusted community member who delivers on my word, someone who shows up consistently, and someone who's not afraid to speak truth to power. As a future legislator, I will put my constituents' needs and wants before my own, and I will always speak to equity and injustices and will work diligently to put people first. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Veronica.
Good evening. Thank you, Jim, and thank you to the committee for hosting this event and everyone watching at home now or in the future, I suppose. My name is Veronica Pillar. I am an educator, a scientist, and an organizer. I've been a Tompkins County resident for almost 11 years. I moved here to attend grad school in physics at Cornell and slowly integrated into the community off of East Hill. And I decided to stay here because, especially recently, I've since graduated in less than 11 years. I've been thrilled to see the energy in this community, people really rising up proactively to fight for justice, for things they believe in, to build new organizations and initiatives to take care of each other. And in integrating into that myself, this has really become my home, and I want to stay a part of it and work to make sure that this community here in Tompkins County stays strong. I'm currently a high school and college physics teacher and a leader in the local chapter of Showing Up for Racial Justice. Through my varied community involvement through that, through SURGE, through the Tompkins County Anti-Racist Coalition, through working with Mutual Aid Tompkins a lot behind the scenes last year, I've seen plenty of barriers to access to our institutions that are there to uplift and support people, and a lot of limitations in who's at the table making decisions on what these institutions are and how people have access to them. And so this showed me just how important the decisions made at the county legislature really are, even if they maybe seem obscure to the general public. So I decided to run for the seat because I thought it was important to have someone at the table, to have all the someones at the table be people who share my values of people first, people over profit, lifting up the most marginalized and meeting people where they are to make sure that we are living out our values of inclusion and inequity, and that we are looking for where we're finding barriers to access and inclusion and breaking those down wherever we can. I'm running to also just better connect the community to local government, making sure people's voices are heard as we strengthen those supports available to the population here. My top priorities, if I'm elected, are increasing access to safe and accessible and affordable housing, workforce development by creating green jobs, promoting public safety as defined by our vulnerable community members, and creating a public broadband utility. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Leslie.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you, TCDC. Thank you to my candidate colleagues sitting here tonight. It's great to talk with you. And thank you to the listening public, regardless of what time you tune in. We really do appreciate folks that take the time to get to know the candidates. It's a lot of work. We're all really invested, and we really appreciate getting our voice out there to be heard and to start a dialogue, right? This is an ongoing conversation. I am really proud and honored to be the sitting District 2 legislator. I have jumped right into the job. I was elected in November in a very close race. And I would say that I am doing my level best to be an everyday advocate for District 2. So District 2 is Fall Creek, Cornell Heights, University Ave, Stewart Ave, and Cascadilla Park Road, slice of North Campus, and a little bit of West. So we've got quite a broad stretch. And it's been an honor to get to know folks in this community, to hear from them, to respond to their needs. I've heard from a lot of folks, and I really do appreciate people who are involved in their community. That was something that was very important to me, and it's the reason I stepped up and decided to give back to this community. I'm a progressive Democrat. I'm a longtime Fall Creek resident. I'm a working parent who has kids in the ICSD, so thank you, Nicole, for your service. I'm a professional planner. I've been working here in the county as a planner for the last 14 years. Got my planning degree from Cornell, so I've had a couple lives here as a student, as an employee, as a young person, and now as a mom and maybe an older person. Okay. I'm a seasoned leader. I've got budgeting experience, and honestly, the work at the county legislature is to manage a $200 million budget, to oversee 27 departments and 8 offices. It's not a small task. I would say 2.5 months on the job. It requires a lot of background knowledge. It requires a hunger for finding solutions, for collaboration, for working across different groups, interests, priorities, and an ability to hit the ground running. And I would say that's exactly what I've done. And I really have appreciated and enjoyed the time working with the legislature. Working with 13 peers is a really great big challenge, but everyone takes the job very seriously and is focused on creating a Tompkins County we can all be proud of and want to live in. A little bit about what I'm standing for in this race. I have taken a public health first approach, focusing on COVID first, and we're starting to see the light on that side, but I think that mental health is our next public health big challenge that we have to address. I want to support our families, develop affordable and quality housing, which I have done working on the Community Housing Development Fund for a long time, grow our economy while prioritizing environmental stewardship, and I am supportive of our reimagining policing and public safety. Good government is possible, and I believe in it.
Thank you, Leslie. All right. Very well. Well, we'll move on to the questions. And the first question is as follows. What would your approach be to the county yearly budgeting process? How would you prioritize the competing needs of a wide range of county departments and local nonprofit agencies, while also facing possible cutbacks, furloughs, and tax increases? And in the current county budget, is there a budget line that you are particularly interested in, either because you support or object to it? Also, the county will be receiving almost $20 million in one-time stimulus funding from the federal government over the next 12 months. What are your priorities in spending this funding? And we'll start with Travis.
90 seconds, huh? So, for me, it's not necessarily about what budget line. there are a lot of programs within the county. And over the years of working with different folks in this community, you realize that a lot of those programs aren't designed to necessarily meet the needs of community members. Some of them are designed to meet the needs of the worker. I think that, before we get to the budget process, there needs to be an inventory done of county programs, who they serve, how they serve them. And then you need to talk to clients that are receiving those services, talk to past clients that have received those services, and employees in those departments. For example, we have a mental health program whose hours are 8:30 to 4:30. Most people don't have mental health crises during that time. They have them in the evening and weekends. We look at homeless issues. You don't have to call DSS to get into the shelter, but DSS closes at 4:30. So what do people do in the evening and on the weekends, right? We look at drug court, for example. In theory, it's great, but some of the most vulnerable populations are required every morning at 6:30 to call in, get their color, to see if they need to go take a urine test. And during that time every day, they should be employed, gainfully employed, so they can get their lives back on track. So that's part of the process for me, is to really look at the programs that the county offers and then get into budgeting.
Thank you. Nicole.
So I think it would be incredibly important to focus on how to make the county whole again, as we think about people that were furloughed and laid off. I think getting back into getting out of debt is going to be incredibly important in terms of thinking about moving forward with the budget. I also think it's important to think about the most marginalized, the most vulnerable population. So when we're thinking about people that are homeless, thinking about people who don't have access to food. So I think looking at the Department of Social Services, their budget line, and how we're thinking about the increase in need given COVID and folks being laid off. Budget line, I would be particularly interested in looking at the amount of funding that has been allocated for daycare. So as we think about people that will be returning to work, how are we going to make sure that people are able to sustain their work by having affordable daycare and childcare? I also think it will be really important to think about our mental health services, as people, again, have been laid off, have been isolated. I think the need for mental health will be incredibly important, as well as recruiting culturally competent therapists and social workers to be able to respond to the needs of the community. Priority for funding with the $20 million, 90 seconds is not enough time, but I think it's really important to talk about how we're going to rebound from the economic crisis.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. That's a lot to try to answer in 90 seconds, but we appreciate your focusing on that. The next question, the next person to ask the question would be Leslie.
Still taking notes over here. Okay, budget approach, budget line, and ARP. So for the budget approach, I would recommend that we streamline our budget process. It's an intensive, kind of multi-week, early fall process where every single department comes to the legislature, presents their entire program, as well as the budget that is or is not proposed by the county administrator, and then any over target requests. It's hours and hours and hours. It also offers an opportunity for nonprofits, which I think is a good idea, to have come in and talk about how they are servicing the public. And I must say they've served heroically as a bridge to the community during COVID. And so some of those groups actually saw funding decrease. Thinking about the approach for this year, I would suggest we have earlier spring presentations on programs, and then later in the fall, focus on the dollars and cents. Make sure we have the time to have those kind of nonprofit and local businesses come in and make their pitch, and then be able to make the final decision that the legislature approves a new budget. For the budget line, the one I'm most interested in is the $30 million set aside for green facilities. This is something that is helping us meet our climate action goals, and it is one of the largest line items in the county budget. And so thinking about how we integrate renewables, energy efficiency, building controls, thinking about new buildings that are more efficient, consolidating and coordinating, it's critical if we really want to meet these goals. Lastly, ARP 20 million. It's got to go to childcare, then food security, mental health, youth development, housing, and helping minority business owners. That's directly from a District 2 survey I put out.
Thank you. Veronica.
Agreed that 90 seconds is not enough time. Budget's a big question. Like, you show me your budget, I'll show you your values, right? That's where we really live it out. So I think, as some already said, having public input to the process at some level, at some early level, is important. I know the county's doing that with the ARP funds, put out a survey soliciting input. Asking, as we evaluate each line item, asking and look at the current budget, ask it, what are we trying to achieve with this money? So we have the freedom to open up, can we achieve the same thing by spending money in a different way, if need be, by spending less money or by better coordinating between agencies or something. Also, I think people who receive agency services, as I think Travis might have said, need to be participating in the process too, not just those who lead the services, because it's the people we're trying to support who can really speak, even if it's just to their own experience, whether it's working or not. For the ARP funding in particular, I think I would ask questions of, can we make investments in it that are going to support us long-term, not just right now, and where the money is going to people who really need it, and it's going to be cycling through our local economy. I think childcare is one big place we should invest. We didn't have enough of it before the pandemic and don't now, but building out a public broadband system is another one that would pay for itself over several years, reduce costs for everyone, and connect people who aren't connected right now.
Thank you. So the next question. People running for office speak a lot of rhetoric about the issues that are common in the community. Specifically, what is one tangible thing that benefits the community that you hope to accomplish in your first term on the legislature? And what strategies would you use to get your other 13 other colleagues to support you? And we start this time with Vanessa.
I assume you mean me.
Yes. I'm Veronica. I'm sorry. There was Vanessa in the last debate, and I wrote it down wrong. I apologize.
It happens. One tangible thing that I hope to accomplish is expanding our green jobs program, and specifically the workforce development pipeline that feeds into that. I know some of this work is ongoing already. What I'm thinking of is we have a lot of green building codes recently are about to be adopted, plus a lot of energy around sustainability, leading to the need to a lot of energy retrofits and heat pump installation and things like that. But Tompkins County doesn't right now have all the enough of a skilled workforce to do all that work. So we have a couple years now to train people up to do that. Hiring local is better, for our community. We're paying, and we should always be paying at least a living wage, if not prevailing wage, for union jobs as we're hiring folks. So it keeps that money in our local community, keeps people from having to travel far, gets folks who are coming out of school, not sure where they're going career-wise, into careers. And I think, I already hear a lot of conversation in this direction, and there's people outside the legislature working on that, like Black Hands Universal, trying to bring in folks who've got some barriers to employment to this exact pipeline. So I don't think it would be too hard to get a lot of support around that, and that's something that's very time sensitive I'd hope to accomplish.
Thank you. Leslie.
Yes, I'd like to work on housing. And so it's something that I have a deep background in. I'd like to continue to expand the Community Housing Development Fund. It is a Cornell County, city, collaboration. We just adopted last night, signed another MOU, so another 6 years of this collaborative funding mechanism that leverages state and federal dollars to bring to this community, develop affordable housing. That's one thing. An exciting part of that is that in the last year, the towns of Dryden and Ithaca decided to join for short term. So really expanding the base, expanding the partnership over time, thinking about other large employers. I would like to advocate for that. This has had broad support across the legislature from all of the municipalities because the Community Housing Development Fund has developed in almost every single one of the 16 county municipalities so far. So it really supports everyone. That's one element, but also inventorying our housing, looking at the quality, the age of our housing, and looking at the match that we need to make between people's needs, from senior housing units to single housing units to family housing. What can we have that's affordable at different price points? We've had any number of housing surveys done, but at this point, we've had a lot of development in the last 5 years too. So the landscape is rapidly changing. We need to be creative and look for infill opportunities, accessory dwelling units, thinking about turning duplexes into owner-occupied condos. Where can we think of something new, including a new waterfront housing development community?
Thank you. Nicole.
One tangible thing that I would like to accomplish in my first term as on the legislature would be deepening the reimagining public safety plan. So really talking to the community about what public safety means to everyone, really thinking about this community justice center and what it's supposed to do and what it's supposed to be, for the community to really own that community justice center. As I think about my own 2 kids and my own 3 kids, but specifically my 2 young sons who will no longer be dimpled biracial boys, but they'll be scary brown men, to law enforcement, I'm committed to developing a deeper proposal that really talks about structural racism, systemic racism, and redefines public safety and who we're talking about when we say public safety and what safety means to everyone, because different people have different definitions of safety. Depending on where you live in this specific community, you define violence as well as safety very differently. So I would want to focus on deepening that plan, and how I plan to work with my other 13 colleagues would be to have real conversations with all 13 of them about their personal experience with law enforcement and how we can collectively envision how we can publicly envision something that benefits everyone and not just the minority of people that feel safe.
Thank you. Travis.
I want to work on something that's tangible to our neighbors and to everybody in this community, and that's daycare. We're coming out of COVID. Daycare issues have been exposed for all during COVID. Some of us have known about these issues for years. We have a crisis with daycare. Some people say we need to throw more money at it. Almost $30 million is given back to the state because we don't have enough daycare providers to offer daycare that's funded through DSS. And so money is not necessarily the issue. Having enough providers and access is the issue. And this is an issue that affects single parents, low-income parents, working families, families with 2 college graduates. If one of the folks has to stay at home because they have kids and it's more affordable to stay at home, their income is limited. Their ability to save for a house, to save for college is limited. So this is a crisis for everybody. 20 years ago, we had over 100 independent daycare providers. We're now down to 30. And a lot of that has to do with issues and changes in regulations from New York State Department of Office of Family and Children's Services. So one of the things that I would do is put together a commission led by Sue Day Hall and folks from the Child Care Center, and then bring in parents, caregivers, the economic development team, businesses, and really look at what we need to do to make this issue something that folks could work around in this community.
Thank you. Next question. Recently, there has been even deeper concern about the cost of housing in Tompkins County, and particularly the city of Ithaca. With wealthier people relocating to Ithaca or flipping houses, as we saw with the city center apartments, the average city resident is concerned about increased assessment and being taxed out of their homes. What are two specific ideas that you have to ensure that local residents and homeowners are not priced out of their homes, especially those who are low and middle income? And the question will go first to Nicole. You're muted, Nicole.
Sorry. Specific ideas that I have about folks not being, I think the city as well as the IDA have to be really intentional when we're talking about tax abatements and who we're providing tax abatements to. As we think about the lack of housing in our community, I think we have to prioritize those who lack the wealth to buy homes. And think about folks like Catholic Charities and Department of Social Services and the amount of money that they're providing folks for Section 8 and emergency housing. So I think we have to prioritize having more low income and middle income housing, as well as refusing to provide tax abatements to developers who are unwilling to provide percentages of affordable units within our community. And I think as a community, we have to continue to put people over profit as much as we need capital to grow as a community. We also need people to live here and to feel safe and to feel wanted and not to be exported out of the community. So I would say really thinking about the developers that we work with as a community, as well as asking the contributors of the Community Housing Fund to increase the percentage of funds that they give to the fund each year.
Thank you. Travis.
The question is interesting. It talks about people being priced out. People need to get priced in. This is not a new phenomenon. Folks have been pushed out of the downtown community for over 20 years now. This is not brand new to this community. And so when we talk about creating opportunities for folks to come back downtown and to be able to buy homes and be able to live in the community, one, we need to do, any housing plan has to be done with dignity. We can't build housing complexes and stick people in unwanted areas where nobody else wants to live. We can't keep building low income properties where kids grow up and are told that they live in a place with the poor people, and their friends can't come to the house because it's where the poor people live. My kids went through that when I lived in the north side housing complex. Their friends couldn't come over. There's a lot of common sense ways to increase housing for people to be able to move into the community and for people to be able to pick to keep their homes. I heard a lot from older folks who complain that they wouldn't be able to die in their homes because they couldn't afford to live here. I have a housing plan. You can check it out on the site. I don't have enough time to get to it. That allows for families on DSS and Section 8 to move back into the community, for people who own homes to be able to assist in doing that, increase their revenue, to be able to pay their taxes and stay in their homes. There's a lot of creative ways to do that. There's no one-stop solution for that, but we need to get people priced back into their homes.
Thank you. Veronica.
Yes. So if I'm understanding this question correctly, it's about ensuring that people who own homes right now are not priced out of their homes. So in that case, one thing I am hearing also as I'm knocking around doors here is a lot of people who say in Fall Creek, who feel lucky that they bought their house 20 or 30 years ago because they would never be able to afford it today. And a lot of them are worried they're not going to be able to afford it as they face retirement, looking at a fixed income because of the rising property taxes. So one non-immediate idea I have, non-immediate because it would require state approval, is why don't we move some of our tax revenue from property taxes to an income tax? We know income taxes can be progressive, property taxes basically never are. And that would ease the burden on folks who just want to keep some stability, but their incomes are changing because that's what they do. Beyond that, I think we really gotta be creative with our housing stock and purchase options. Programs like INHS do some really good work to allow people to buy homes when they might not otherwise be, with things like the land trust model. So I think, but they've got a long wait list, so expanding that would be helpful. As well as with our county revenue, we got to stop giving tax abatements to wealthy developers that don't actually need them. Another developer will come and build the housing. We can put that towards supporting people who need it.
Thank you. Leslie.
Yes, I have a few ideas for this. One, we need to build more housing. I know that's a controversial thing to say right away, but we need more. There is not enough housing around here to house everyone that wants to, needs to live in this county. More than a third of the folks that come in on a daily basis are in commuters from out of county. Some people might choose to live out of county, but many would like to live here. We need more housing of every kind. We've been doing a great job downtown lately, up in College Town lately, building student-built, purpose-built housing. Some is for single professional types, but it's still a pretty limited segment of the population that we need housing for. I would suggest that we think about how to work countywide and think about where there are opportunities for single family builds. We don't have any of that happening around here. Folks would like single family housing, not everybody, but it needs to be an option on the table. Without that, the pressure on the single family homes that do exist is so great that the price for them far exceeds what their actual quality should yield. Another idea I have besides building and, interesting ideas for places to build. How about in strip malls? How about redeveloping some of our downtown 13 corridor, integrating it, making it a mixed use walkable community all along 13, tying it into Southside would be a great connection. The waterfront will further tie that together as far as locations for these areas, and some are downtown. We can also work in our villages and areas that are in a nodal development pattern outside. We need to think about tax abatements for individual homeowners who actually improve their properties. Give them a year or two off. And how about assessment? Does it have to be annually in downtown? Maybe not, maybe every other year. And think about maybe not tying it to your next door neighbor's sale price. Maybe looking at the average of the assessments around you would be fairer, particularly for people on fixed incomes.
Thank you. So the next question, America's racial reckoning is currently amplified. What is the most recent book or article or programs that you have read or viewed about racial oppression, and what are two specific takeaways that you can put into action? And the first person for this question is Leslie.
Thank you. I've been watching a lot on race and reading any number of articles and books about the racial reckoning we're having. Certainly, how to be an anti-racist is something that many folks are getting familiar with, but also reading about the history of all kinds of marginalized communities, from the BIPOC community to folks that are indigenous in this area. I've been trying to make sure that I'm learning more about the Cuyahoga Nation lately and thinking about what it means to be in an area that was originally settled by other peoples, and how to recognize that, and how to advance and bring to light and kind of make sure that folks know that this is an important and an original settlement, and that we are all part of the community, but some folks preceded. And as far as what the two takeaways would be, it would be to be aware and to maybe step back and to make sure that we are thinking about how others are perceived and perceive us, to be a little softer in our step, and to always be an advocate and a voice for folks that may not have the same privilege. And it's a very interesting time. And I think that self-awareness as well as community awareness is top of mind. Reimagining public safety is something that we're all going to be moving forward with together and trying to have a reckoning. It's a national issue, and we're taking it on head on locally as well.
Thank you. Veronica.
You're asking about a book. I have not been reading a lot of books lately, honestly. So mine might also be How to Be an Anti-Racist, or is it How to Be Anti-Racist? When I actually co-organized the community read of that book last summer and learned a lot from that. But more recently, I've been involved with and reading articles about the situation with the Gaiga-Ono people, or Cayuga people, they're also called, who were native to this land before white settlers claimed it, before the Sullivan campaign went through and destroyed many of their residences and buildings and killed a lot of them back in the 1700s. And right now, up in Seneca Falls, a sort of almost a softer, modernized repeat of that is happening as the Bureau of Indian Affairs has empowered with federal power someone to be the putative leader of the Cayugas who is not part of their traditional leadership and not giving the federal resources that he has over to actually support the Gaiga-Ono people. So I've been reading about that and learning about that as I've gone up to some solidarity actions in Seneca Falls, which I realize is out of this county, but it's the same people that used to live here. So that's something that's been on my mind recently. And I think actually like showing up in solidarity and moving resources to people who really need them are things that we can do.
Thank you. Travis?
You know, I don't necessarily need to read a book or to watch a series to understand what my life has looked like for 49 years. I know that there are systems in place that are designed to keep me and folks that look like me, to keep us limited, to keep us from achieving, to keep us from being successful. And for me, there is work that needs to be done on a few different fronts. There's long-term issues like breaking down those systemic systems. There are opportunities to develop programs and guidance and help that's needed to ensure that young people now don't fall into some of those systems, right? There's also the understanding of what race is, and that it was something that was constructed to justify slavery and protect capitalism. It doesn't exist, and we still talk about it as if this is what it is, right? We still fall victim to that. There's also personal accountability. And so I was taught when I was younger, and I've taught my son and others, that we know what the game is. We know what it's designed to do. And so what are we accountable to? What are we here to do? Are we here to be victim to that? Or are we here to overcome? Nobody that I know that looks like me that's successful had racism solved for them. Nobody came in and did away with it for us to be successful in our own right. We worked, we fought, we took advantage of programs, we had people help us. And that's what I continue to do. You have to fight it from all fronts. You have to understand what it is. And you have to be willing to be a warrior in that fight.
Thank you. Nicole.
So like Veronica, I have been too busy to read. But the last book that I read was probably Angela Davis's Freedom is a Constant Struggle, where she shows the connection between Ferguson and Palestine and advocates for liberation for all humans. In terms of two takeaways, as Travis mentioned and said, as a black person, as a black woman, I don't need to read a book to have any specific takeaways. I live my life through my own truth, advocating for my children, other people's kids. Being on the Board of Education is a way in which I put myself into action to liberate children so that they're getting everything that they need, regardless of race or class. Being part of Black Lives Matter, advocating for Black self-determination, for folks to get the services that they need. last year, I, myself, and a few others that are part of Black Lives Matter Ithaca put together a mini grant fund where we gave out $250 to any Black or Brown person who was in need as just a stimulus to help folks. I live my life wanting to give back and to do whatever I can for people that look like me. So thinking about the Tompkins County Legislature and how I would move forward there would be making sure that everything is being done through an equity lens, especially when we're talking about policing and we're thinking about the criminal justice system and the district attorney's office.
Thank you. Okay, next question. The Green New Deal, climate justice, and climate justice are tied to racial justice. What does this statement mean to you in the work that you see yourself doing as a legislator in this area? For instance, starting soon, there is going to be a significant increase in jobs and money from the federal and state programs, for energy efficiency, heat pumps, and solar. How are we going to ensure that those jobs and the related wealth benefit BIPOC populations? What structures do we need to set up to help this happen? And the first person for that question would be Travis.
So for years now, we have always looked ahead at the curve to see what's coming up. And so in order to get folks ready for these type of jobs, we need to do exactly what I've been part of for years. And that's job training, creating programs like HETP, our CDL program we had at GIAC, to get people ready to be job ready for these jobs. One of the programs I'm working on with Black Hands Universal is a pre-apprenticeship program to get people ready. We look at all kind of programs in this community that are job training programs, but they're not specific to this. So you have to sit back, you have to create a program that allows folks to get some experience, to get their feet wet, to get their foot in the door, so that when these jobs come along, they are ready. We hear all the time, oh, this person doesn't have the skills we're looking for, or this person doesn't have any experience. So what we're trying to do is create opportunities for people of color to get experience, work in these jobs, work in these trades, whether it's a summertime, whether it's an apprenticeship, whether it's an intern, so that when these jobs actually come online, they are ready for it. They know what those jobs entail. They have the skills that are needed, and they could step right in and be gainful employees in this area. I've been meeting with Luis Torres, and we have some ideas through My Brother's Keeper to get folks ready. It's what we've been doing for years now at GIAC.
Thank you. Nicole.
So I'll answer the first part. As we think about climate justice, I personally believe climate justice is impossible if we're not reaching for racial justice. We can't talk about sustainability without, there's nothing sustainable if everyone is not doing well, if everyone is not thriving. So in order for us to achieve climate justice, we have to reconcile racial justice. In terms of how are we going to ensure that those jobs, that it will be really important for our new Chief Officer of Diversity and Inclusion at the county to be in communication and collaborating with the Human Resource Director. So as we think about these jobs that will be created, how are we being very intentional about where these jobs are going to be marketed? Everyone is not on the Human Service Coalition listserv, so they're not receiving some of these jobs because that is not reaching certain communities. I think it'll be important for us to have open houses for people to come in to learn about these new jobs. What is a green job? As we think about people who will be transitioning from brown jobs to green jobs, we have to have training programs because all of these skills will not be transferable. So I think we have to be intentional and thoughtful about who we're marketing these jobs to and making sure that we're providing people with the resources that they need to be successful in these jobs.
Thank you. Leslie.
Thanks. Yes. So the Green New Deal, climate justice, and infrastructure bill, and how do we make sure that the workforce of tomorrow is inclusive of everyone? It's not a small task. I would say a goal for climate justice, racial justice, a goal coming out of that would be safe, affordable, high quality, energy efficient, green housing for folks. How do you build the housing of tomorrow? You have to develop that workforce, as Travis was talking about. And so something I've been working on in meeting with local Union 81 is about the great pipeline that they've been developing of a very diverse young workforce, bringing them into the trades. It's important that we make sure that we highlight trades as a real high quality career option for folks moving up in time. Everyone. They have done a great job at diversifying their young trades folks in the larger region. They service from Ithaca to Syracuse and all the way up to the North Country. They've got farm kids and city kids and kids in Ithaca, and they are doing a wonderful job of creating a boot camp that really shows young people how to get involved and kind of gets them ready for the job so that they've already done it before they get to a work site and it feels overwhelming, or they're not in their own town and they feel out of place. I would say that in tandem with improvements in TC3 and thinking about the new micro-credentials that they are proposing that are stackable, where you can be in the trades, you can learn about a trade and it ties into that, but also building for green trades in this. I'll be tomorrow at the TC3 Board of Trustees meeting and thinking about how they're going to build their new workforce of tomorrow, making sure that we're educated and that we've got great trades and that we're very inclusive.
Thank you. Veronica.
Thank you. So that first part about climate justice being tied to racial justice, as Nicole said, I don't think you can have climate, I don't think you can have any kind of justice without racial justice. Climate justice to me means that our climate goals, trying to make our energy use sustainable and mitigate climate change the best we can, are built around preserving the environment for everybody, not just more privileged people, not just people who have the resources to stave off the worst climates or literally move away from the worst climates. Honestly, here in Tompkins County, we're more likely to receive climate refugees than become them. And the other part of climate justice is that the work we do toward those goals again, centers equity, and where it benefits people, it benefits those who've been affected the most, benefits the most marginalized people. So here we're looking at benefiting Black and Indigenous people of color, and benefiting people, say, like those returning from prison who have a really tough time getting back into the workforce because lots of barriers. So I already spoke some about building a jobs training program. I think that'll involve a lot of collaboration, again, between the trades, between the BOCES, between TC3, between groups like Black Hands Universal, connecting directly with exactly the people that we're hoping to get into these jobs.
Thank you. Let me just say that I'm having a little bit of internet freeze up, one of those things that happens in the virtual world. Ted, if for some reason I disappear again, you have the questions, so please step in and go to the next question in the list, which will be now number 6. The city's version of the public safety report provided that a new Department of Public Safety should be created and the existing police would have to apply for their jobs. As a county legislator who lives in the city, what is your viewpoint on the city's idea? And the Tompkins County Reimagining Public Safety Initiative includes a lot of different recommendations for county action. Which recommendations do you think will be most impactful in creating a safer community for all, and which will be the hardest to implement? And once again, I know these are long and complicated questions, and you are free to choose how you want to approach what aspect of them. Veronica, you go first for this question.
Great. So to the first part, I think it is good that we're making, or at least attempting to make, significant changes in the existing police department, because I think there's overwhelming evidence and overwhelming the voice from the community saying that policing as it is does not work, does not actually create public safety, and in many cases causes more harm. I think that the challenge here is going to be the decisions made along the way in creating this new Department of Public Safety, and with the existing police having to apply for their jobs, asking what are the new jobs, what are these responsibilities, are we changing them? I focus more on the county recommendations as I'm seeking a county seat, and the recommendation I'm most interested in is the one about creating alternative emergency response systems. Right now, basically, something happens, a lot of people default to call 911, and if it's a fire, you know what you're getting. If it's a medical emergency, you know what you're getting. Anything else, you're getting the police, and they're maybe showing up with guns, and this is maybe not at all appropriate to the situation. So creating a different scenario that comes with people leading with de-escalation, leading with compassion, not bringing in weapons, and who are able to connect folks to wraparound health and other human services that they may actually be in need of. That's going to be, I think, the most valuable. Though, of course, it's building something new, so hard to implement.
Thank you. Leslie.
Yes. So constituents here in District 2 have shared with me time and again that they believe that it's important that IPD does reform. So I am reflecting those constituents' feedback and saying it is. And the city administration believes it is, and the mayor believes it is. And we have heard from the community throughout this many months process that the community thinks it's an important aspect, and maybe the leading aspect of reimagining process. So what does that mean? It means an Ithaca Police Department that's led by a civilian. It means potentially having responders that don't come out that are armed, law enforcement officers, or having a team of folks that comes out maybe with a mental health service provider, perhaps coming out and responding for something that is not an emergency, that does not require anything that escalates a situation. There are plenty of times when folks need to call because there's a dog loose in the community. Does it need to be an armed police officer that responds? No. So I think this really offers an opportunity. And everyone I've talked to thinks it's a good idea if we're going to be serious about this to reform it. I'm not saying it's easy. It's probably going to be the most challenging of the recommendations that came out of the report. One of the ones I'm most excited about is creating the Center for Community Justice. And last night we passed resolutions to bring on 2 new employees to start that effort. So the county is making a serious effort right now in putting its dollars behind creating something that really has the community, law enforcement, and the city county sitting together and creating a new world for how we define public safety locally.
Thank you. Nicole.
I agree with the recommendation to create a new, for police officers, for existing police officers to have to reapply for their jobs. If we're agreeing that we are reimagining and restructuring public safety, then I think that we need a recommitment from law enforcement that they are going to abide by these new ideals and new ideas of what public safety is. I want a commitment from law enforcement that they are going to put all people first, that they will protect my children, that I will not be afraid to call law enforcement because there's domestic violence happening outside my home. And I don't know if that's going to exacerbate the issue versus help. I shouldn't be in that position where I'm knocking on a neighbor's door to make sure that everything is okay and to get children out of the home versus calling the police. So yes, I would support police officers having to reapply for their jobs. In terms of recommendations that I think will be most impactful, I think that creating this emergency response team that would respond to situations that don't require guns is important. I also want to highlight that people have still died at the hands of law enforcement without guns. So it is a start. In terms of what I think will be the hardest to implement, I think the suggestion or the recommendation for a healing plan. As we talk about healing and addressing trauma, I think we also have to name what we're talking about, which again is racism, structural racism, systemic racism, something that is not mentioned within the report. So before we can heal, we have to be real, raw, and honest with each other. And to build that trust, people have to be ready to have that come to Jesus moment that Black and brown people are not making these things up in terms of what they see, what they feel, and what they experience.
Thank you. Travis.
So just a correction, there isn't a recommendation that folks from the PD have to reapply for their job. That's not a fact. That's not what's going to happen. That was discussed during the vote, and folks from the PD aren't going to have to reapply for their job, and nor should they. Those folks have spent some time at their career. They've built pensions. They have built their retirement, and asking them to reapply is not right, and it's not even legal, to be honest with you. I sat on the Reimagining Task Force, and the recommendations came from conversations from the community, and so the recommendations are good. We have a task force that's going to move forward and offer Common Council the plan of what the new PD should look like, what the departments should look like, the roles of those departments. There will be a chief of police, but there'll be a superintendent of this division, and hopefully it'll be true to the word, and it'll be somebody from the community of civilians, somebody that doesn't have experience in law enforcement. The structure of policing, the training of policing, a lot of that has to be re-examined, looked at, and changed, obviously. And I think folks from the PD are willing to invest in that work. This is it's a complicated issue, but I believe that we all know a change is needed. And I think that current members from the PD are willing to step up and accept those changes as well.
Thanks for the correction, Travis. I was based off a question that was submitted to me, so I probably should have done more homework on that, but thanks for the correction on that one fact. So the next question is, New York State has a huge influence on the work of county government. Please tell us what your concerns are with respect to state actions in the next year or two. What should the county lobby for or against with the governor's office and our state representatives? And the first, this question goes to Nicole first.
Regarding what we should be advocating for from the state, I would say the Healthcare Act, as well as more funding for childcare. Those would be my two things that I would say that I would hope that as a legislature we would be advocating for, funding for healthcare as well as childcare, as we think about the health of our community. Our community is as healthy as the people that make up our community, and them being able to have what they need to maintain, to survive, to thrive, is being able to take care of themselves physically and mentally, as well as taking care of their children.
Thank you. Travis.
I'm going to circle back to daycare. So one of the reasons why we have so few private daycare places is that when they changed the rules in early 2000s, 2002, 2003, a lot of OCFS rules harmed private daycare places. So for example, if you had a daycare in West Village or Chestnut, you had to close it down. In West Village, you had to close it down because your back door and front door were too close to each other. In West Village, you had to close it down because maybe you were on the second floor, or when you walked in, you had to have a front door that led out into your property. You couldn't have a front door that led out into a hallway. So a lot of those mom and pop daycares closed down because of OCFS regulations. Instead of saying, okay, you know what, municipalities, what we want you to do is work with your local fire department and find solutions that can keep children safe and manage in those places. So for example, in West Village, we could have retrofit a window, had a ladder put in and a slide going out and same with Chestnut, and same with some of the local apartments, so that they could have kept doing daycare. So OCFS needs to change some of its rules, keeping kids safe, but working with our fire department to come up with solutions that allow for everyday folks to do daycare like they did in the early 2000s and beyond, so that we can increase the number of daycare providers. Doesn't matter how much money we have, doesn't matter how accessible it is, if we don't have enough providers, that drives cost.
Thank you. Veronica.
The New York Health Act is the big one, like Nicole said. People deserve a right to health care without going bankrupt, and people have lots of challenges around that in this county, and especially finding dental care that's good through their insurance for some reason. New York Health Act would be extremely important on that front. And honestly, also to some extent on housing costs, because a lot of our taxes pay into Medicaid, and it would eliminate that burden as well. There's also a couple of bills about climate justice, the Climate and Community Investment Act and the New York Build Public Renewables Act that didn't pass this round. I would lobby for those. If we're serious about climate justice, those should go through. Beyond that, increasing the funding for home health aides, that's something I've heard from a lot of people in my district. They've struggled to hire people because the pay reimbursed by the state is so low. And people have had a lot of success talking with our state representative's office, but you shouldn't have to do that just to be able to hire someone when you need it. And finally, kind of piggybacking off of what Travis said, I know there's a lot of tensions in our social services department between what it's like to administer social services to people who need them here and how that does not necessarily fit with the regulations the state puts in place that our county employees are required to abide by. So figuring out where we can change things to better serve the actual folks here in the county is another place to do some lobbying.
Thank you. Leslie's turn now.
Yes, so there are many things that we should be lobbying the state for. First, we need to lobby to get our sales tax that was swept returned to our budget. It happened for the last couple of years. There have been increased takings, if you will, from New York State, more recently for hospitals, which were needed in COVID, but it doesn't look like that money's coming back. We would like it to come back to our coffers. There are our taxpayer dollars. I would say lobbying for CFA funding. As we think about the ARP funding, so all these acronyms, the American Rescue Plan funding, infrastructure bill that'll be coming, there's also the consolidated funding application that we, individual projects and municipalities are eligible to apply for annually and compete. It's a little bit of Hunger Games, but it goes region by region in New York. We need to continue to talk about the Southern tier and find collaborative opportunities, but also investments locally in our county that can bring together these funds to really create something exciting. I want to make sure that we're leveraging all of those funds and working across our municipal partnerships, think about where we can make some transformative change. And those are the kinds of things that get actually funded. So whether it's a brand new waterfront district, whether it's thinking about redoing all of our sewer infrastructure that comes down into the city that's needed, we need to be lobbying the state for that. Redistricting is something I'm worried about. We need to advocate for keeping Tompkins County in one voting district so that we actually have a block and some power in thinking about this next legislative term, how Tompkins County gets treated. That's really important. And then lastly, parole and bail reform. We need to keep advocating.
Thank you. So for the next question, a big discussion facing the county is redistricting. During the last redistricting, the city of Ithaca lost an important seat and vote on the TC legislature. What is your understanding and knowledge of local, state, and federal redistricting, and what do you see as the best options for Tompkins County at each level, local, state, and federal? And that goes to you, Leslie, first.
Okay, so local. We are just starting on the county legislature to talk about local redistricting, which will happen at the county and city levels that we will be launching this fall. And so we'll be bringing together a citizen board. It will not be elected officials on this board that take seriously the 2020 census numbers that we're all anticipating to look at how we can very fairly attribute new legislative districts locally. So how many people are here? Where do they live? How can we best represent them? Those are the considerations that go into. There's a lot of mapping process and looking at densities. So I think that that process has been fair and well done in the past. I would advocate for us to continue that. And anybody who's interested out there, think about it now. They're going to be soliciting soon to get people on board. At the state level, we need to make sure that Tompkins County has a voice. We have been sliced in half to dilute our democratic power, basically, in upstate New York. We need to make sure Tompkins County remains as a whole and can have some influence to create, some new representation in this region that actually reflects who we are as a county. And so I would say that's going to take a lot of lobbying. I think we're going to be working closely with New York State Assembly member Anna Kellis, with other representatives locally, and looking at some senators who may be supportive of our effort. Nationally, what do we do nationally about redistricting? I'm open to ideas. I'll let the next people do that. Thanks.
Thank you. Veronica.
So locally, I know it would be for the redistricting process, as you know, it depends on census results and the facts of where people live and where we can kind of block people together in ways that make sense and aren't gerrymandered for some political reason. So like Leslie said, having it just be a group of non-political citizens making these initial decisions, I think is important. It would be, I don't know if the numbers work out, but it would be great if our city wards and our within the city county legislative districts actually matched up better than they do. Like they do kind of, but I'll tell you, it's very confusing to explain this to voters and for people to even know who the representatives are, which is tough. You know, I want everyone to know who at every level is the person they can go to with questions for information to represent them. At the state level, definitely agree Tompkins County should be kept together. And at the federal level, for a long time now, we've had a representative in Congress who distances himself from Ithaca and has called us extreme Ithaca liberals and has made it clear that though we are in his district, he is not even attempting to represent us. So if some district change can be done so that that doesn't happen again, I know this individual is on his way out. I think that would be great in terms of us having a real voice there.
Okay, thank you. Travis.
You know, we know that the district lines are redrawn every 10 years, and it's supposed to reflect the representation of those areas. You know, if you take a step back, this is why it's so important for people to be involved in the census. This is why it's important to remove the fear for people of color in taking the census. This is why it's important to encourage folks to get involved. And this is why it's important to push back in every opportunity when we create opportunities for people to be scared to get involved and say who they are. So, you know, when we look at what's happening now, hopefully the population has grown enough so that we don't lose a seat. But this goes back to, you know, people living in fear in certain situations and exposing themselves and being involved because they don't trust the system. Tompkins County has to remain a voting block. It's imperative that we get to stay, you know, we're not split, so that we are better represented at the state level.
Thank you. Nicole.
I think it's important. I think it's important that we make sure not to disenfranchise people who historically have been blocked out of voting. As we think about the consensus, as Travis mentioned, it's really important to acknowledge that some folks don't feel comfortable identifying themselves in such a report. Some people are not here, quote unquote, legally. That impacts our census. As we think about state and federal redistricting, I think it's important for us to make sure that we're aligning ourselves with the values of the people that live here. So when we're thinking about redistricting, that we're having real conversations about the differences between intent and impact, and what the impact of us will be if we lose power.
Thank you. So the next question is, being in elected office is a noble accomplishment, but it is also hard work that often requires sacrifice. What personal sacrifices are you prepared to make or think you will have to make to serve successfully in this role that you seek? And the first person for that question is Travis.
You know, serving for me isn't sacrifice, it's an honor. I don't look at it as what I have to give up personally. I chose to do this because I want to serve this community at a higher level. I chose to do this because I want to improve the quality of life for everybody in this community. I want to work with all of the legislatures, regardless of you know, what part of the county they serve. This isn't about my sacrifices. This is about, you know, the people in this community. You can't do this work if you're worried about what you have to give up. You can't do this work if you're concerned about losing time at home or not spending time with your loved ones or your kids. You have to go into this knowing that you are giving a piece of yourself to this community. And you have to do that with love. You have to do that with dignity. And you can't do it with any sort of feeling that you're losing yourself. So for me, this is all about serving this community. I don't see it as a sacrifice. I just don't. I can't, because I would be honored to be in a position where I'm representing the voices, the concerns, and the lives of the people in this district and county.
Thank you. Nicole.
I'm currently an elected official, so I understand the sacrifices that need to be made to be in a volunteer role. I would say that being a volunteer or being a public servant is equivalent to sacrificing, because you're centering other people and taking a step back. You're putting the needs of your community first, versus what I specifically want or what my personal agenda is. That is the way that I've lived my life. So when as I think about taking on this role, I've already paved the way to be here. So it's something that I look forward to. And like Travis said, it's not something that I personally look at as sacrificing. I see it as me just continuing to give, because my love tank is full and I want to continue to give as much as I can.
Thank you. Leslie.
Thank you. So I'm learning a lot. I considered initial run, second run here, however many runs this is, it's a return to my public service roots. I felt a calling to come back to be a public servant again. I worked in local governments for a long time and miss that interaction and really want to be a voice for, communication device for, an advocate for my local community. I have a lot of skills to bring to bear and experience that I thought would be very helpful. It's time, right? It's time, but it's time well spent. So is it a sacrifice? Do you feel the benefit of it? Does it make you feel great? All of the above, right? It's all wrapped into something. And so if you feel good about public service and you think it's important to step up on behalf of your community, then it's not a sacrifice. It's a different way of thinking. And, it's pretty exciting, actually. It's exciting work and it's hard work and challenging. And if you rise to that, then you're the right person for the job. And I found it to be very motivating, actually. And I like the challenge. And I think that, there's a lot of good work to be done at the community government level. And so I'm pretty proud to do the work. And I'm proud to sit here with everybody that's excited to do the work too. Thanks.
Thank you. Veronica.
Thank you. So I was describing some life choices to a friend and she said, I like your style. And she didn't mean my clothes. It was that I'd just finished my PhD and then I was working part-time at an elementary school after-school program because that's just what was available and what I felt like doing then. And I didn't have any particular future plans. I just knew I wanted to stay here in Ithaca. So and now I have a more stable job, but it's still have been cobbling together part-time ones. I don't have kids here. So in terms of my time freedom, I'm, flexibly ready to devote a lot of it to serving in the legislature. And I know you give up some flexibility too. I haven't served in elected office before, but even just being a candidate, people there's some anonymity that goes away. People recognize you on the street. You can't just creep out to the store in your sweatpants and no one's going to know who you are. And I think, you have to stay accountable to the people you're trying to serve all the time. You don't really get a break, even if you're taking a break from meetings. But in a way, in less formal ways, this is also how I felt and how I've behaved in, smaller projects and smaller organizations that I've been a part of with Surge, with some past mutual aid roles. So it'll be a different shape of a similar sort of sacrifice, if you call it that I've made before, and I'm ready and excited.
Thank you. Excuse me. The last question. I'm sure you're happy to hear that it's the last question. You are running for the Democratic nomination for the county legislative seat in your district. Tell us why you are a Democrat, and given that we have the former president and a majority of the Republican Party refusing to acknowledge the legitimate results of the last election, are you committed to accepting the results of the primary if you lose? And will you agree not to run against the winner on a third-party line? And the first person to answer that question, that goes to Veronica.
Thank you. Why I am a Democrat? Because of looking at, especially in contrast to the federal administration we saw the last 4 years, I think certainly the Democratic Party locally has pulled together a really strong, promising amount of political power, working, I think, fundamentally for, reasonable policies that will benefit people. And I can't say that of every other party. And I also know that it's, there's a piece of it where I'm trying to represent my constituents in a certain district, and most of the district are also Democrats. So it's almost the best position to come from to align with the people who I'm trying to be connected to. If the other part was, am I committed to accept the results of the primary if I lose? And yes, I am. I've been endorsed by the Working Families Party, so I will appear on their line in November no matter what. But if I lose this, I won't be campaigning.
Thank you. Leslie.
Sorry, I was getting a call. Thanks for the question. Yes, I am a lifelong Democrat, a progressive Democrat. I will not be running if I do not win the primary. So I can answer that right up front. But why am I a Democrat? Because I share the values of the Democratic platform. I am for protecting the community and recovering from COVID. That's their number one. That was my top issue, is to make sure that we take a public health first approach, building stronger, fairer economy, achieving universal health care, protecting communities, building trust, looking at combating climate crisis, strengthening democracy, and having world-class education. That's all part of the Democratic platform. That's what I stand for. I think that I am a strong Democratic candidate for this. And yes, I'm running on the Democratic line.
Thank you. Nicole.
I would say that I believe in the democratic ideals and ideologies in terms of economic equality, healthcare, social services programs, gun violence reform. So as I think about what Democrats tend to stand for and what they typically support, they're usually progressive programs that help people that look like me, people that grew up poor like myself. If I think about just being a kid and not having had any type of history or education in politics, I grew up thinking that the Democratic Party was for poor folks and the Republican Party was for wealthy people. As someone now that is in my mid 30s, that has obviously changed. But when I think about the party that will in the least be committed to saying on paper that they're working to make sure that all people have what they need, or most people have what they need, that would be the Democratic Party. Am I committed to accepting the results of the primary? Yes, of course.
Thank you. And Travis.
I think that the Democratic Party is in line with my beliefs. I don't think that the Democratic Party has put the people that they say first all the time. I think that at times the Democratic Party takes they just assume that all Black people think alike. They just assume all poor people think alike. But I've been a Democrat for most of my life. I'm going to continue to be. But when I look at governing, when I look at being I guess I hate the word a politician, I'm not wedded to just one party's views. I'm wedded to what's best for the community. I'm wedded to what makes the most sense, what makes the best sense for the people in this community, for the people that I'll be serving. I'm not stuck on this party line idea that it has to be this way and that's the only way, because actually sometimes when you work with others, you get better results. And that's how this country ran for many years. As far as the results of the election, look, if I lose, I'm not going to run under another party line. I'll do whatever I can to support Nicole. She would be representing me in this district. So I would support her to the fullest, because the more successful she is, the more successful the folks in this community in our district are. So I would support her 100% and not run again on another party line.
Thank you. And thank you all. Thanks to our candidates, Travis Brooks, Nicole Lefebvre, and Veronica Pilar and Leslie Schill. Thanks also to Peter Rothbard for being our timer, and Ted Crane for supporting us, keeping the Zoom room and the YouTube running. We're going to be moving now into the closing statements. I'm sorry, I was getting a little bit ahead of myself there. But thank you all. I really do want to thank you all for stepping up and being willing to run. It's without candidates willing to run for these local offices, we simply wouldn't have local government. And I think it's a very healthy expression of our political life in Tompkins County that we have 4 primaries going on for this county legislature. And so once again, I want to thank you all for stepping up. So let's move to the closing statements, and I'll try to go in the reverse order from the opening statements, and hopefully I'll get it right. We'll start with Leslie.
Thanks so much, Jim. And thanks again to TCDC. I'd like to thank you all, my colleagues here tonight. It's been a great discussion. It's really interesting. It's always wonderful to have these kind of talks and hear from other folks. And I really appreciate the folks that are tuning in. We need you to vote. Come on out and vote, please. Early vote, show up on June 22nd. Every vote counts. Veronica and I can attest to that. I'd like to say that I would be honored to have your vote again. I would very much like to continue in my role as the county legislator for District 2. I have a lot of great ideas. I think that I can really advance some important initiatives addressing housing, climate action. I have a plan to roll out a county strategic plan that really frames these issues, as well as thinks about how can we create truly inclusive communities moving forward. Inclusive, green, sustainable, long-term, lasting, where people really are supporting one another. These are some of my top initiatives. I'd like to say that I have been able to join the legislature, which is a place of transition at the moment. 2 of our longest serving legislators will be stepping down, and they really are going to leave a gap, right? Their service has been amazing. Leslyn Bing Claiborne and Martha Robertson have been leaders of that body for a long time. We're getting ready to have a lot of new legislators show up. I think that it would be helpful to have someone who's already been through a budget cycle, who's going to help select our new county administrator and make some really influential decisions and have already some experience under the belt, as well as the experience I bring from my work life to bring to bear on our behalf. And so I would be very honored and humbled to have your vote on June 22nd. And thank you.
Thank you, Veronica.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you to the whole Tompkins County Democratic Committee for having me and all of us. And thank you, Leslie and Nicole and Travis, for this sharing your ideas in this conversation. I think it's been really good. I want to echo that exhortation for everyone to get out on vote by June 22nd, or early voting is going on now through Sunday. Just participating and voting, hugely important if you're in districts 1 or 2. I'm running on the strength mainly of my grassroots organizing background and community connections, because I believe that with a lot of big decisions coming down the pipe, although you could probably say that at any time, and choices about how to implement decisions already made, like the Reimagining Public Safety proposal, we need people in the legislative chambers who are committed to be accountable to the most marginalized in the community, who are coming from a lens, all decisions through a lens of equity and through a lens of inclusion, and looking at what how diverse our county is and what people's real living situations are. I've been endorsed by a bunch of progressive groups, the New York Progressive Action Network, Progressive Women of New York, the Working Families Party, the local DSA, the Sunrise Movement, the local Sunrise Movement, I should say, as well as a bunch of current and former elected officials and grassroots activists. So I've got a broad coalition of support locally. And I'm excited to keep that connection going and bring these skills of bringing people together into the legislature chambers. As Leslie said, there's going to be a shakeup in the legislature no matter what. And so I'm really looking forward to being a part of that, working with a bunch of other new legislators, and hope to have your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nicole.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Tompkins County Democratic Committee. Thank you to all of the folks that are here tonight. And great hearing from all of you. In these emotionally and economically challenging times, I will be a strong advocate and leader for my community and constituents. I will lead with compassion, honesty, and dignity. My public service experience, along with my system thinking skills and social and racial justice principles, will make me a strong asset to the legislature. I will always apply any work that I do with an equity and inclusive lens. As a child of a single mother who grew up poor, I understand the importance of social services because I grew up on these services. I understand the importance of working with people who have different views and opinions. Diversity at the decision-making table is important to address the diverse needs of our community. As a working class mother of 3, I will continue to organize and highlight the voices of the unheard. I will continue to serve my community. I seek to serve because it is my desire and passion to see every single resident of Tompkins County living their best life, an equitable life, a life of abundance, of joy, of fortune, and fortitude. So I implore everyone that is watching to get out and vote between now and June 22nd. Thank you.
Thank you. And Travis.
Well, thank you for having us this evening, for giving us an opportunity to share with the community. Look, I'm somebody who rolls up their sleeves and goes to work. For a better part of 22 years, all I've done is look at problems in this community, problems that are facing the people that I serve through my job, and figure out how to solve those problems, put together programs to address their needs, figuring out dinner programs, lunch programs, food programs for kids who weren't getting meals. Do things like bringing lead to this community to help folks that are constantly dealing with issues in the judicial system around issues of poverty, mental health, and addiction. It's hard for me to talk about my accomplishments because I don't think about them. I just am thinking about the next issue, the next problem, 2 problems ahead, and who do I need to bring together to solve those problems and address those needs. That's what I do. That's what I've been doing for 23 years. You know, it's simple. You have to know what's happening in order to, serve the community. I was hoping that food equities, food injustice would come up in this evening. 38% of eligible residents take advantage of SNAP. And why is that? Part of the problem is, like I said, how DSS is set up and designed. Because of that, there is $18 million that's not awarded, which means this economy loses $30 million a year. This is from 2019, $30 million a year of the unused SNAP benefits. Think about that. Think about how that would benefit local farmers or local businesses, right? You have to know these things. On the website, brooksforlegislature.com, there are plans for every issue that we talk about, not talking points, but actual plans. This is why I want to serve. I hope to see as many people out next Tuesday to vote and taking advantage of the early voting process. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. And thank you once again to all the candidates and to Peter and Ted. Let me just say that one point I'd like to make to anybody listening and about the Tompkins County Democratic Committee is that we are always open to new members. We are not some kind of an exclusive club, but rather we are the Democratic Party. We are the People's Party. You can easily join your local committee in your ward or in your town, and then you can certainly join the county committee through a process that's pretty simple and straightforward. We welcome new members. We want people from all parts of the community and all voices of the community. We want to have your voices at the table. And we invite you to seriously consider that by being in the party as part of, you're able to be involved in the process that helps determine the direction of the party and the naming of candidates and the support of candidates to move the party and the county and the locality and ultimately the country in the direction you want to see it move. So please think about that, and please at least know that you're always welcome to join. So with all of that, I thank you once again for watching the program tonight, or in the future when you do watch it, and definitely get out to vote. Early voting is ongoing now, right through the 22nd, and the polls will be open on the 22nd. So the higher participation, the greater the participation, the greater for all of us. So thank you, everybody, and good night.